in Japan, what happens is if two people separate, they can voluntarily decide to share custody. Does not happen very often, to be honest, because it's not a society where this is something that's normal. People don't understand what joint custody is. So what happens is if the children leave the household, which sometimes is most often the mother, let's say the mother leaves, she physically leaves with the children. We can call this abduction, or she just like goes to stay with her parents or whatever. The children become on the registry of the parents that left. The children are considered property of the household that they are in. And they do not want to move the children after they've been moved. So when they go to court, they say, where are the children living? Oh, they're living with mom, dad. It can be dad as well. It happens, dads take the kids as well. In X household, we're not going to move them back to the house they've lived in maybe their entire lives, because we don't want to, upset the balance. And that parent gets sole custody. We're not just talking about sole custody. Custody means the children are always with that parent. The other parent, if they're lucky, will get some visitation, which is an hour, 3 hours a month. And it's only done at family visitation centers run by the government. That parent has to pay out of the pocket hundreds of dollars an hour. If they're not Japanese, they're not allowed to speak their native language there. They must speak Japanese. And I mean, just imagine visiting your children in kind of an institution, in a government facility. It's not child friendly. Then we're not just talking about custody, we're talking about parental authority. When you divorce, even people that are still married, mom and dad in most countries have the equal right to make decisions about their children's education, health care, all of these things. In Japan, when there's a divorce, one parent gets sole custody and sole authority. That means if you are divorced and your child wants to go to a school, you have no say in that. That's maybe a simple example. Let's say your child gets very sick and you need to make a decision about what medicine to give that child. God forbid if they need to stay on life support. You cannot make a decision about your own child. Even worse than that, because the parent that has sole custody has sole authority, if they remarry or their mother or father wants to adopt the children, your own children, your biological children, can be adopted without your consent. We see issues with child custody around the world, but the issues we see in Japan are like no other. And let me reiterate, these are not in the best interest of a child. We see issues with child custody around the world, but the issues we see in Japan are like no other. And let me reiterate, these are not in the best interest of a child. Children want mom and dad in their lives. Children want to grow up in a loving environment, and Japan refuses to do that for children, for half Japanese, half foreign children, and 100% Japanese children. It's no different. Mothers are losing their children, fathers are losing their children, and worst case, children are losing a parent. So that is kind of, in a nutshell, the child custody and authority situation in Japan.
Sure.
My children were taken in July of 2014 on a vacation to Japan. I went to Japan to try to get them to come back in October of 2014, was not successful. And that's the last time I actually got to see my children, hold my young children's hands, put them on my lap, carry them on my shoulder. And that's the last time.
So how many years is that?
That was October 2014. So for 8.5 years. Close to it. Yes.
You have not seen your children?
I have not seen my children since then.
And how many children and how old were they at that time, and how old?
I have 2 sets of twins, and my oldest set of twins are boys, and they were 11 and a half when they were taken, almost 12 when I saw them last. And my youngest set of twins are a boy and a girl, and they were 6 and a half-ish. And so those are the ages.
Okay. Did they communicate with you from Japan? Did your son write to you, or what happened? Can you explain?
Right. When they first got there, we did a lot of FaceTime and a couple of times a week. And then when the longer they were there, the communication got further apart, and the individual communications themselves or sessions on FaceTime got shorter and more hurried. And it was quite obvious in talking to them that since we're on video, you can see what I'm doing. But when they were talking to me, they'd look at me and they'd keep doing this.
Yes. So
So it was pretty obvious that they were being watched.
Yes.
Or monitored, and
Yes.
very uncomfortable and not very forthright.
Yes.
And then suddenly in August of 2015, they stopped talking to me altogether, wouldn't take calls, didn't want to FaceTime. And that was the beginning of no contact.
Got it. So
Can I touch on a point here?
Yeah, sure.
So I think this really goes to show something important. Some people will assume if your children are abducted in any country, they'll turn 18. They'll come back home. They'll come back to dad or mom. But the reality is that these children are brainwashed. They're with one parent. That parent is very angry at the other parent for reasons, between the two parents it should be, and they brainwash their children.
One of my older sons, shortly after being brought to Japan, sent me a note on a little recipe card, and it was like scribbled, almost looks like a ransom note, to be quite honest. And he just simply said, I miss you, I love you, wish you were here, and love. And then he said his name, wrote his name. Okay, that same child.
That was after how long?
What?
That was after how long?
It was after being a month or two there. Okay, wrote me this note, this letter. And then that same child within 2 years.
In 2014.
2014, he wrote that. And in court filings, I have a letter filed as part of the discovery or affidavits, evidence in our court hearings, that same child wrote a letter to the U.S. Embassy in his name saying that I'm no longer his father. He doesn't want me ever to talk to me again. And he's begging the U.S. government to make me stop, and he wishes I was dead.